Hi there and welcome to the video. So this video is basically some advice that we often give to conveners of schools debating competitions, particularly people who are running competitions either as a charity or as a university debating society. And this is something we get contacted about here and there, usually by people who know us personally, just sort of saying, oh, I'm convening this thing, any advice? It's not a complete how-to. I think a complete sort of convening 101 video would be pretty long, and I don't know if it'd be that interesting or that useful. So this is more going to cover two or three really key topics. The first of which is dealing with teachers. Now, obviously, as a convener, the people you're going to have the most direct contact with in terms of schools are going to be some type of teacher who runs debating. Obviously, some schools there will be a dedicated debate coach, but a lot of the time, even in schools that have a debate coach, because a lot of the attending a competition stuff is administrative and safeguarding and risk assessment, that stuff is often handled by a teacher who will usually be like an English or history teacher. A few tips for dealing with teachers that I wish I knew when I first started running competitions. The first is please be precise and concise in emails. Just tell teachers the information they need. Like, bullet points are great. It doesn't need to be eloquent. We don't need to know. I mean, I appreciate the attempts at friendliness, but honestly, very few of us care what you're studying or where or how long you've been debating for. We just want to know, start time, end time, when we're getting the invoice, how many teams, stuff like that. Precise information is also very useful. I think that sometimes people think teachers are needlessly anal about a lot of stuff, but what's important to understand is that we have to fill in risk assessment forms for every competition, and even online competitions, which is mad, but we do. We have to fill in risk assessment forms, and a lot of these, and permission forms, and we have to get permission from parents, and we have to get sign-offs from our superiors and our heads of department or whatever else, head of extracurricular. And some of these forms are real prescriptive. Often, if you are taking kids to a debating competition in real life, you have to plan a route. So if you're getting off the train station at like Russell Square and walking over to LSE to do LSE schools, you have to put in the risk assessment form the route that you are taking from Russell Square to LSE. That's not a joke. So we like precise information and concise information. Dealing with kids and parents is often a little bit like herding cats. And we are very busy, we're juggling a lot of plates. I know that you are too. I know how much work goes into convening competitions. I also remember how busy I was as a university student. I'm not trying to one-up conveners here. I'm just saying that teachers are busy. We're juggling a lot of plates, and we have to be very precise, and we have to be quite efficient. We get hundreds of emails every week. Please don't send us 5 emails if you could have sent us 1. And please don't send us a 1,000-word email if you could have sent us a 200-word email. Please also don't wing stuff, and please stay consistent. If you don't know the answer to a question, then say I don't know, I'll get back to you. That's fine. But don't invent a novice definition on the fly because a teacher asked you for one in an email and you were like, I've got no earthly idea. And same with staying consistent. If you decide, you're going to do 4 rounds, you're going to do 3 rounds, you're going to use Zoom, you're going to have a bronze, silver, and gold final, you're not going to have a bronze final, whatever. It's just nice to stay consistent unless there's a material change in circumstances, because when things are chopped and changed around, it just gives a veneer of chaos, even if that veneer is not accurate. And if things are significantly changed around, teachers might start to get really upset because it starts to impact our communication with students. If we've said to students, okay, there's a novice break at this competition, so we're going to encourage novice kids to come along, and then suddenly there's not a novice break because, the conveners changed their mind or whatever, or like some teacher complained that there wasn't a silver final, but there was a novice final, and that was stupid, so you switched. And now there's a bunch of other teachers who are like, but I've brought novice teams. That situation, you can't please everyone, so just stay consistent. When we return to IRL competitions, honest to God, one of my top tips for keeping teachers happy is just providing coffee, tea, and biscuits in the morning. It's not that expensive to have a few thermoses of hot water and some instant coffee, a jug of milk, and some tea bags. But it makes so much difference to us. Like, it's quite silly, but it does make teachers feel a little bit more appreciated. It just settles us down. We get into a big assembly hall. We've just had to herd 12, 13-year-olds across a city in the morning time. We're not necessarily in a good mood. We're not being paid to be here. And we do tend to get in a much better mood once we get to watch our kids debating. But we're often not super happy in the morning. And just having a hot coffee there in the auditorium, it just gives a veneer like professionality, like welcoming, and we can chat to another teacher while we're making a coffee. It's that first impression bias, that halo effect, I think really works here. That if the first thing that happens to us when we come in your building is we're ticked off and we're told, there's some coffee and biscuits there, help yourself, lovely to see you, already we're like, wow, I'm excellent, So, halo bias, use it. Please do be patient with teachers. Some teachers are arseholes, but most of them aren't, or at least not intentionally. And sometimes we're not going to get back to you super quick because we have a lot going on, and frankly, debating competition is rarely going to be top of our priority list. We're responsible for the well-being of 100 kids. We're not always going to get back to you super quick. And also sometimes we're not empowered to do things on your timetable. One of the things that I find funny is when a competition will email you on Monday when a competition is on Saturday with an invoice and be like, please pay by Saturday. It's like, I'm not empowered to do that. All I do when you send me an invoice is forward it to the finance team. And I can nudge the finance team if it's taking them an astronomically long time, but finance teams in schools are not going to process an invoice in 7 days most of the time. There's nothing I can do about that. So please do be patient with us. There's only so much we can do. And feel free as well to get some market research. We are the customers, kind of, in this market of debating competitions. And there are Facebook groups with debating teachers and debating coaches now. And there are ways to contact large numbers of us. And if you're not sure if teachers would prefer a 3 or 4 round competition, difficult motions or easy motions, this date or that date, Saturday or Sunday, weeknight or weekend, ask. One of the biggest problems in the debating circuit right now is the lack of communication between suppliers and consumers. The university debating societies and the charities that are running events and the schools that are participating in these events have very fraught lines of communication, and that is an issue. And if you can sort of bridge that by posting some questions or information on Facebook groups and just being an effective communicator, that really does go a very long way, and we really do appreciate it. So that's broadly speaking some thoughts when dealing with teachers. So in a previous video, I kind of let a bit of my annoyance show through about this topic. I'm going to try and remain calm here, but if you're convening a competition, your number one priority has to be the well-being of the participants, and particularly the well-being of the children. And that means that safeguarding has to be paramount. Now, safeguarding and equity don't necessarily have to be the same thing. You could, I suppose, have an equity officer and a safeguarding officer, or have a safeguard. Maybe you're the safeguarding lead and there's an equity officer. But I think that safeguarding and equity have a lot of overlap and crossover, and so probably should be rolled up together. And as such, you really have to make a very serious decision about who is going to be your equity officer or equity officers, and if they are up to the job. Because the thing about equity officers is, at schools competitions, you have to trust that they'll eject a CA if the CA, repeatedly refuses to correctly pronounce the name of a BAME student despite being corrected, or if the CA keeps swearing in oral adjudication. You also have to be willing, as a equity officer or safeguarding lead, to eject teachers. Um, there's a teacher in Scotland who is just notoriously a problematic male, and a competition I was at years ago was just really out of order when talking to a much younger, much smaller female judge, and he should have been bumped out of the competition, and he wasn't, because the equity officer was a 19-year-old fresher who had no idea how to deal with adults, let alone a teacher who'd been on the debating circuit for 20 years. The problem with debating, one of the many problems with debating, is that it has this bullshit hierarchy where like we think that someone's more worthwhile because they've like won best speaker at Euros or something, and that often means that if you have an equity officer who's not themselves a very successful debater or judge, and the CAs are, or some of your judges are, there's a problem there. Now that means that when you hire an equity when you get an equity officer, they have to either be someone who does not care about this nonsense hierarchy, or is themselves high enough in it that they're not going to have a problem telling a CA like to get a grip. And that often means that your equity officer should be one of the more experienced and older members of your ORGCOM. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, I've worked with people who are 18, 19 and just light speed competent, and I would have no doubts at all about them being a safeguarding lead at any type of educational event. And I've worked with people twice my age who, I wouldn't trust with a pair of scissors. So I don't intend this to be an ageist statement, but from personal experience, I would have been way worse at dealing with CAs or teachers as an 18, 19-year-old new to debating than I am now as someone in my 30s who's not only very experienced in debating themselves, but like has for many years now had the perspective that the hierarchy in debating is nonsense, and does not care one whit if I upset the CA of worlds because they do some messed up thing, because like my life doesn't revolve around that anymore. And I think you need to really consider that when you pick an equity officer. 99 times out of 100, you're not going to have a serious equity or a safeguarding issue at a competition. And so it doesn't actually matter who you're picking as an equity officer. But if you do have a serious issue, if you do have a serious incident, you really do not want to drop the ball there, because that is just a big issue. So take it seriously. So lastly, I just want to talk very quickly about the types of people you're going to encounter in this debating competition, and a few things to bear in mind about them. The first one is you will encounter teachers who are veterans, teachers who have been doing this for years, been attending competitions for years. Typically, those teachers aren't going to have loads of questions for you, as long as you're giving them the requisite information in a timely fashion, and they're typically not something people you have to spend a lot of brain space on. The only thing to caution about veteran teachers is that while they are often the most outspoken teacher on the circuit or in your competition pool, they're not necessarily always going to be representative of teachers as a whole, because most teachers, if your debating competition has a remotely large reach, most teachers and coaches aren't that experienced in debating. There's only so many schools in the UK that have really committed debating sides and debating teachers. Most are new to this game. There's also, therefore, going to be a lot of teachers who are unsure what exactly is going on, are very new to debating, have maybe not done a lot of competitions before, particularly if you're running a competition that's that's making a very decent attempt at some outreach and getting some schools in that aren't your standard debate schools. Those teachers may have a lot of questions for you. They might require a little bit more hand holding. They might require a lot more information than you initially anticipate. Please bear in mind that if you've been on a debating circuit for 2-3 years, maybe longer, it's easy to forget how many things you know that you think is just obvious, but it's not if you're not a debater. You know, what BP is, how long that means prep is, the fact that we power pair, the fact that we rank teams first to fourth, the fact that closing government and opening government don't work together, how to read a draw. Things like that are often things that we just take for granted as experienced debaters, but there's no reason that a teacher who's just decided to start running a debating society last week knows what any of that is. So please be patient with those teachers. You are occasionally, and I really do think it's very occasionally, going to encounter some people who are just bad faith actors, like just grouchy arseholes who make mountains out of molehills and are overly critical. And I would just say to ignore those people, they're not worth your time. And lastly, thinking about kids, the students involved, I think there's really only two types. There's debate kids and non-debate kids. And you typically don't have to worry that much about debate kids. Kids who go to a debate school or have done a bunch of debating competitions before, know what to expect, they'll be fine. What that means then is, as a convener, when you think about what information you're sending out to teachers, what format that information takes, what you're asking to be passed on to students, the briefings that you're budgeting time for or not budgeting time for, or deciding to pre-record or deciding not to pre-record, who's giving those briefings? All that has to be with the idea that the students you want to be most concerned about are the non-debate kids. The kids who are maybe in their first, second, or third competition, who maybe come from a school that doesn't really prepare them for debating competition because they don't know how. The kids that might not realise that closing government and opening government don't work together, or might not realise that we don't really take style into account, or can't read a draw. So when you think about things like who's giving a speaker's briefing, if you're involved in that as a convener and it's not just a CA decision, or how much time you're allocating for a speaker's briefing, or if the speaker's briefing is pre-recorded, please bear in mind who these briefings are for. They're for the less experienced students. And yeah, I think that's really all to say on that. So thanks so much for watching. I hope this was useful. If you are planning on convening a competition, or you are currently in the process of doing so, thank you very much. I continue to really enjoy attending debating competitions as a teacher. My students are getting loads out of it. And I think in general, the debating circuit, especially in the UK, has produced remarkably high quality competitions in the last year since this whole online debating thing happened. And I think there's a lot of people working behind the scenes to make that happen and who deserve an applause that they will probably never get. So thank you for your contribution. And yeah, if there's anything I didn't cover or anything in particular you have questions about, please do feel free to comment below, or just get in touch. That's why stand-up speaking exists. So we're always happy to help if we can. Take care.